Come on, baby. Come on, baby. Goodbye.
Enemy vehicle disabled.
Is Battlefield 2042 good now, and should I play it? Well, as someone who's been playing and enjoying 2042 for a while, it can get a little tiring hearing this question over and over again, but nonetheless, it's still a fair question. With yesterday's release of patch 3.2, DICE added back in a class system to Battlefield in an effort to create the classic squad and class-based synergies. Does this update improve the gameplay and take us back to the good old days when medics were medics and engineers were engineers? Well, let's find out. Firstly, the class update side of the patch does improve the gameplay. All engineers now have repair tools, which I think is one of the biggest updates. I've already seen way more vehicles being repaired and dedicated tank crews. All recons now have spawn beacons, giving them more options and making them extremely useful for conquest and breakthrough when playing on the attacking side. I've already seen a much greater number of spawn beacons in play. Supports are now the only class capable of distributing ammo and health. This is certainly a step in the right direction and does change some things to be better, but it also highlights other issues with the game, like certain guns such as LMGs not really needing to rely heavily on ammo resupply, while SMGs run dry very quickly. Also, Falk and Angel can still both heal and rearm themselves and teammates, maintaining that sort of awkward superclass that they are. Assault classes generally got a nerf as they can't carry ammo or health kits anymore and instead get the single-use heal pen, but they're still very effective classes and have some great abilities, so they're still going to be highly used. One of the biggest holdups or differences between this system and say the classic class systems is not having dedicated weapon types for the classes. Even though many of the previous games had universal weapon classes like shotguns or carbines, 2042 lets every class use every gun. And they've tried to band-aid the situation in 3.2 by offering weapon proficiencies for classes, encouraging you to use specific weapon usage, but in my opinion, this isn't going to be a major consideration for most players. I still expect to see Falks sniping from across the map and recons using machine guns. One of the reasons class weapons worked so well in the past was that if you wanted to snipe, you had to play the recon and learn to work with the recon's gadgets and tools. It forced variety into your gameplay more than 2042 does. And if you wanted to use a rocket launcher, well, you're going to have to pick from a slightly less well-rounded weapon selection. I think devs are worried that making class-specific weapons would have upset the player base that was used to running snipers on, say, support classes and such, but I personally think, having played 3.2, that it's now the main and last holdup to retrieving that classic Battlefield gameplay. And to be fair with DICE, the smaller quantity of weapons makes it harder to think about dedicated weapon categories. However, now that the class update is out, I think it's clear that dedicated weapons are the first major holdup to attaining the classic Battlefield feeling. DICE even has a clear path to it, with marksman rifles and utility weapons becoming the universal class weapons, and then assault rifles, SMGs, LMGs, and sniper rifles getting thrown into dedicated class selections. Personally, I think that would probably work out pretty well, and I'd be willing to ruffle a few feathers to make the game better and more interesting. Now that said, the class update is still a massive improvement overall. Most areas of the game are seeing an increase in class-specific gadget usage, and that is great. Some of the neat or funny updates are seeing EOD bots in the field again. These things are surprisingly tanky and can really distract armored vehicles. The Javelin rocket launcher is bringing some real power to destroying tanks, which is nice to see, and there's far more mines around the map due to Liz's new hybrid rocket mine loadouts. Now, I haven't seen many claymores yet, just a few, and I haven't been killed by them yet, so it's possible that these gadgets won't be as annoying as I initially anticipated. That said, DICE also added thermal optics to the game, and they're quite powerful and potentially game-breaking in the right situations. Take a big, wide-open, clustered map, pop on your thermal optics, and see the heat signatures of all your enemies from extreme distances. Personally, I always disliked these things in previous games, and DICE had to do a lot to mitigate their effectiveness, which hasn't been done in 2042 yet. black borders around the optics, making them tough to see anything in your peripherals, having heat-reducing camos in the game so players could avoid being detected, and reducing the overall thermal signature range were all part of previous games, and they don't seem to be here. Basically, put one of these on, look through the scope, and shoot the glowing things. They even help reduce the visual clutter from debris and muzzle flash, making staying on target even easier than before. Again, DICE has years of using these mechanics in games, and doing the same things and making the same mistakes and not using that data for future titles is both confusing and frustrating. The only saving grace now is that thermals are countered by smoke grenades, so at least the smoke thermal meta is kind of dead, although I've already seen posts showing that they do see through environmental smoke, not from smoke grenades, so that is a problem. But in my opinion, they're gonna need to adjust these thermal optics soon so that everyone isn't just playing with thermals all the time. Now, map-wise, the new Breakaway map rework is fantastic when you're able to queue up for it, that is. My first 3-hour play session and it queued up only once, which is endlessly annoying. DICE launches a new map and then doesn't let you specifically queue for it. Why are you like this, DICE? Just launch a playlist specifically for this map when you launch the new map. Now, despite this map being a rework, the map honestly feels practically brand new in many regards. The glacier area has all kinds of fantastic new routes and verticality. The oil rig is updated with new approaches and even has vehicle entry points. It's an awesome location and the gameplay around it felt amazing, to be honest. The final base has had a lot of its cover updated for better internal firefights, and without question it's my favorite rework so far, and it could easily become one of my favorite maps. It's certainly a major highlight of this patch if you can look past the annoying queuing situation at the start. There's also 3 new portal weapons, the PP2000, the MTAR-21, and the M39 EMR. The only one that I've tested extensively so far is the MTAR-21, and as expected, it's just not particularly good. As I've said before, I'd rather that DICE make one weapon well balanced and set up to take advantage of all the different 2042 attachments and mag types, rather than just injecting a bunch of copy and paste weapons into the game that don't feel like they belong. I'll be testing the other weapons down the road, but I've been so underwhelmed by the portal guns that I basically don't get excited for them anymore. And I've always really liked the MTAR weapon platform, so it's just kind of sad seeing it come into the game and being such a meh weapon. Now, tanks have been upgraded and can now equip the active protection systems, which should help them counter the extreme power of the javelins, and helicopters now get an always active below radar perk to break missile locks from other vehicles when they fly close to the ground. Pretty much all rocket launchers across the board have gotten upgrades regarding stuff like reload speeds and projectile velocities. This is to help with the fact that there's just going to be less rocket launchers on the field. Hopefully this improves the M5 skill shot potential. Boris's Sentry will now deal damage to vehicles and prioritize vehicles over infantry, which is a pretty cool update and makes him fit in much better with the overall engineer class. Crawford's mounted Vulcan gun can now deal damage to vehicles, so I'm very curious to see how that plays. It would be cool if it became an effective anti-air platform, but I think its limited aiming angle might prevent that to an extent. Falk can now pull out her defibrillators and charge them up to revive for full health, making her better at revives than Angel or Irish. McKay's grappling hook range was reduced from 30 meters down to 24, which is sad, but he's still pretty darn effective. Rao's hack ability now allows for rockets to lock onto hacked vehicles, which is pretty epic, and it's going to make him a much better pick to synergize with engineers. Granted, he does lose the ability to equip rockets, but it seems like that synergy should hopefully work out well. Weapon proficiencies have been added to the Hazard Zone game mode, LOL. There's also a lot of other nuanced changes and things worth reading up on, but those are kind of the big ticket items. Overall, it's a massive patch and one that we're not going to see the full extent of until players get more familiar with the new balance, gadgets, and meta. It's exciting on most fronts and makes the few remaining problems of the games much easier to understand. 2042 has come a long way since launch, nearly unrecognizable in some ways compared to the launch version, and I think for many fans of the franchise, if you haven't jumped back on yet, now is definitely the time to do so. From here on out, new maps, weapons, and other quality of life improvements should bring the game to a fuller and more varied experience. I'm having a lot of fun with it currently, and I'm excited to see how this new class system shakes things up. up. Again, this patch is so massive that it's pretty much impossible to give you a conclusive overview of how it's changing the game in its current state, so we're really not going to know the final effects for probably another week or so. For those of you who have played it, what do you think so far? Let me know in the comments, and also check out this Battlefield Forgotten Features video next if you haven't seen it already. It's always cool to look back at the many crazy features that this franchise has tried over the years. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. This is LevelCap, signing off.